Welcome back. The week just kicked off, and already we've got a slew of news relating to the Mueller report. Now, the House Judiciary Committee, they're going to be holding a vote on Wednesday that about whether or not to hold Attorney General William Barr in contempt. Barr, as you know, has refused to comply with the subpoena demanding the entire unredacted Mueller report. The Justice Department, it has written back to the committee chair, Jerry Nadler, offering to negotiate. So, as they say, stay tuned. Also, President Trump, he doesn't want Bob Mueller now to testify, and if that sounds a little contradictory, that's because it is. He used to say that he was fine with Mueller appearing before Congress. Now, not so much. Meantime, the president's former personal attorney and fixer, Michael Cohen, he's going to the pokey, heading off to the federal prison today. He's starting his 3-year stretch for campaign finance violations and other crimes, and he gave this warning before he left for the new home for the next few years.
There still remains much to be told, and I look forward to the day that I can share the truth.
Joining me now, former federal prosecutor Gene Rossi. Gene, before I get to all that stuff, late this afternoon, nearly 400 former federal prosecutors signed a letter. By the way, were you one of them?
I was one of them, proudly.
Right. Good. So I'm going to get into the significance of this, but if I can, in part, I want to read a little portion of it, and then I want for you to talk about the significance of it. Quote, each of us believes that the conduct of President Trump described in Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report would, in the case of any other person not covered by the Office of Legal Counsel policy against indicting a sitting president, result in multiple felony charges for obstruction of justice. Now, lay out for our audience, these were not 400 partisans or whatever else. As I said off the top, they span multiple administrations, Republicans, Democrats. This was a bipartisan note, and it made it clear that there was a there. This was not a complete exoneration, and moreover, it wouldn't even be a close call if this was a regular person, that they'd be looking at real trouble for obstruction. Do I have it right?
You have it right. And Richard, the significance of this letter cannot be overstated. The roughly 400 prosecutors range from Republicans to Democrats, independents, and it's individuals who have 10, 20, 30. I think there's somebody with over 40 years of DOJ experience. And one of those signatories is former Governor William Weld, who was also the U.S. Attorney for Massachusetts, and I think under Ronald Reagan, he was head of the criminal division. And he doesn't put his pen to paper lightly on such an important topic. But I gotta stress this. The letter talks about 3 or 4 felony charges that could be brought against the president if he were Donald Smith instead of Donald Trump. But the letter excludes another hydrogen bomb in the Southern District of New York. If Donald Trump were Donald Smith, the Southern District of New York would have indicted him August 22nd of last year, which is the day after Michael Cohen pleaded guilty and for which he reported for prison today. That conduct in the Southern District was also egregious, and the letter doesn't talk about it. It focuses on Volume 2 of the Mueller Report.
You know, I saw an interesting piece. I don't know if you got to see it, Gene, but James Reston in the Times reminded a lot of us that when people make the comparisons with Watergate here and now, everybody thinks, well, it was about the tapes, and of course it was. But there was a third article that they never even got around to. And just as a reminder, it had to do with subpoenas and not obeying the subpoenas. And we have a soundbite. It'll take us back in time. This is Barbara Jordan, a then Congresswoman from Texas. And she sat on the House Judiciary Committee. Let's take a listen to what she said then and how relevant it is today.
The Constitution charges the President with the task of taking care that the laws be faithfully executed. And yet, the President has counseled his aides to commit perjury, willfully disregard the secrecy of grand jury proceedings, conceal surreptitious entry, attempt to compromise a federal judge, while publicly displaying its cooperation with the processes of criminal justice. A president is impeachable if he attempts to subvert the Constitution.
I'm telling you, think then, think now. Oh. Explain to the audience, you can't just say, bleep you, if a subpoena comes, and let alone that implies seemingly to anyone that he wants, that he'll decide somewhat regally who will and won't be allowed to speak when he's already waived his executive privilege. Talk about the chapter we're in right now, and then make it applicable as it relates to Mueller, as it relates to McGahn, as it relates to Barr.
You know what's amazing? You could take Barbara Jordan's speech and play it today, and it would apply with equal force to the president. Here's what the president cannot do, Richard. He cannot, as you say bleep to any grand jury subpoena or any subpoena from Congress because I am the president. And he can't, in bad faith, invoke executive privilege when it clearly doesn't apply. Why? He's already waived it. And the third thing is, he cannot send signals to McGahn, to all these witnesses, that I'm not going to allow you to testify, even though I said a couple of days ago that you could. And about 2 weeks ago, I wasn't real keen on this whole impeachment article based on his failure to comply with the judicial process or the subpoena process. But I'm now coming to the point that this article could be the most powerful because he's just not trying to use good faith legal arguments. He's basically sticking his finger in the wind to the entire Congress. And I want to talk about the tax returns. In 1974, the Watergate Committee, the Judiciary Committee, voted on an article of impeachment based on Richard Nixon's tax cheating. Let me tell you this. If they ever get a hold of Donald Trump's tax returns, as someone who worked for the Department of Justice Tax Division for 11 years, I can tell you this. Those returns are a treasure trove of crime. And the Congress has requested them. There is no legal basis to oppose that request. That also could be an article of impeachment.
Let me ask you about that, because just today the Treasury Department said, yeah, no, we're not turning them over, speaking of the tax returns. So then it gets into the legal remedy. Where do we go as it relates to, well, time out. Barr can't just decide unilaterally that he's not going to testify. On Wednesday, they're going to vote, even if it's along party lines. Obviously, he could be looking at contempt. We talk about the tax returns. It seems pretty clear for me there's black letter law that they got to turn them over. Congress has a right to see them here, at least as I understand the law. When do the courts start getting involved, Gene? And do they fast track this? Or are we going to be talking about this after the 2020 election?
No, what's going to happen, Richard, you're going to have a double-barrel shotgun from Congress. One is they're going to hold them in contempt, and they're going to start hearings on the evidence in volumes 1 and 2 of the Mueller Report, plus the other issues such as refusal to turn over taxes. That's one barrel of the gun. The other is they're going to go into the courts, and they're going to get the courts to order Barr et al. To testify and find that the privilege doesn't apply. And if the courts do not get their attention, then it's going to go expedited to the Supreme Court, just like the Pentagon Papers and just like the Nixon tape case. So we could probably have Supreme Court decisions or a decision by the end of this year or early next year. We're not going to wait till January of 2021.
Real quickly, and then I got one more question after this. You believe we're going to hear from Barr, McGahn, and Mueller? If you were a betting man, do you think we're going to hear from them in the next 3 months?
Well, after the Kentucky Derby last Saturday, I'm kind of gun-shy on betting. But I would say there's a 75% chance, maybe 80%, that at the end of the day, maybe not next week, maybe not this month or June, at the end of the day, very soon, relatively, we're going to have the three amigos. We're going to have Mueller, whom I respect greatly, Barr, who was less than candid under oath. He'll testify. And Don McGahn, who I think will turn out to be a hero for having a moral compass, something that seems to be lacking to me in parts of the Department of Justice and in the White House.
And they're telling me I'm already over, so I only got 10 seconds. Cohen saying, hey, I got more to tell. If he had more to tell, he would have already gave it up, right? I mean, isn't this just somebody saying, please, I don't want to go away for 3 years. Anybody listen to me? Or do you think he's really got more to give?
I think there's a little fluff, but I do think he is continuing to cooperate, and he does have more to give. Yes.
All right. As they say, stay tuned. Gene Rossi, as always, great job, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
When we come back, lawmakers in Florida, they've just passed a bill. Get this, it's going to allow the arming of teachers. After the break, we'll be joined by a dad who lost his son at Parkland. He'll join us to explain why he's adamantly against this new law.
I lost my son on February 14th, 2018 at the Parkland shooting. There's nothing I can do to bring him back to our lives, but there are many things we can do together to make some changes and to prevent this from happening again.